So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Careers in Data Analytics. My name is Matthew Garcia. I'm an Associate Director for the Shevik Glaubeck Center for Career Strategy and Professional Development. I'm joined here by four professionals and alumni in the field and industry that you are looking to learn about tonight. Now, a lot of great questions planned, a lot for each of these individuals to share about what it is that they do for a living so that you could have a bit of an entryway and be more informed as you navigate to that same kind of career path. So without further ado, I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to share their name and current title and who they work for. But if they could very, very quickly, to get the wheels turning, is one thing that they wish they knew when they were a college student about data analytics and the career. And I'm just going to pick randomly to start with Evan.
Hi, everyone. My name's Evan, also Zev Kohler. I'm a director of advanced analytics and audience strategy at Group M. That's a very, very large advertising firm. And I went to YU. I graduated OU in 07 with a major in psychology and a minor in general business. I started off in Sims and changed my mind and didn't know what to do with it. So I just kept going a little bit. The question is, what do we wish we knew back then?
Yeah, what do you wish you knew about the industry while you were still in college?
So what I wish I knew about, well, one, how important analytics is. Probably would have spent more time in college itself. You guys are very lucky that you have a lot more available to you now than back when I was in school, as well as that for people who are interested in getting a doctorate, how that path has become much more academic than it was in the 70s and 80s. So you have to be careful who you speak to for career advice, because someone who went to school in the 70s and 80s, they were on a different career path than what's available now, which I didn't realize when I was in YU.
Awesome, thanks so much. Zev, you mind taking it over and giving a brief intro? Same kind of question.
Yeah. My name is Zev Rosenbaum. I'm a manager in the analytics department for VaynerMedia. They're an advertiser company just like Evans. And I graduated YU in 2017 with a degree in business intelligence and marketing analytics. I would probably say that I didn't realize how the prevalence of Excel and how if you know a VLOOKUP sometimes, that could mean that your computer whiz in a lot of different places wherever you're going. It's kind of shocking, and we talk a lot about machine learning and predictive analytics. You can think about like k-nearest neighbors and stuff like that, and that's all fantastic. That's great. But I'm still consistently shocked as to how much Excel is used in a lot of large companies, as well as how many people don't have a good foundational understanding of Excel. So that's kind of one of the things that I wish I knew when I was back in college about analytics.
All right, thank you, sir. Jonathan, why don't you take it away?
Everyone, I'm Jonathan, manager on the product analytics team at Peloton, which is a fitness technology company. I think the thing that I wish I would have known, well, I didn't know, I pretty much knew zero about data analytics when I was in college, but along the journey, something that I wish I knew was that there's a lot of people out there who have really strong technical skills, who can, write the meanest SQL query, or who are like experts in, Python pandas or whatever tools that the roles that you're looking for are. But that's kind of, I would say, like almost easier to learn and pick up. And some of like the core foundational statistics and kind of like theory and like application to the real world stuff is what really sets people apart.
All right, thank you, sir. And Mendel, last but not least, why don't you give us a brief introduction and give us your perspective?
Hi, my name is Mendel. Thanks for having me here. I'm a team lead of data at Mosaic Learning, an e-learning and conference company. We provide custom as well as SaaS services in the e-learning and conference space, mainly providing to corporations and trade unions. I graduated from YU, Masters of Science in Quantitative Economics in 2019, and first worked startup in finance and then eventually made my way here. One of the things that is, I would say I wish I knew, but it's something that you don't often experience until you make it into industry, is that Kaggle data sets basically don't exist. You know, some of you are, I can see smiles from the other panelists. Oftentimes, you know, an application is built a specific way, hopefully well for the way the application is going to perform. But then in order to perform analytics or to glean other insights from that data, there's often going to be a huge amount of effort put into understanding all the data, how to tie all the interesting and powerful pieces of data together. And that often, in addition to understanding the application and how all these things are built, you also need to have some good subject matter expertise, domain expertise, in order to understand what it's actually talking about. And then you put it all together and can do analytics on that.
Awesome. Thanks very much. So we're going to transition into our first set of questions, and I'm going to select some members of our panel to answer each of these questions. But other panelists, if you have a nugget of wisdom to share, as some would say, please feel free to contribute onto these topics. So kind of picking it up with Mendel, what would you say are some strategies that our current students can use to find practical experience while they're undergraduate students or even graduate students that could apply to their first role, earning an internship, and so
on? Experience in general is great. So any sort of working on a real world problem, whether that's assisting a professor with research, which is what I did for my graduate thesis, or any form of internship, shadowing people who are working on real world problems. Talk to your professors, talk to people who you know, who work in industry, and you might find some opportunities in places that you won't expect. You don't necessarily need a data analytics company, but virtually any company in the world wants to know what's going on, and trying and working to figure out an actual problem is the most valuable skill in data analytics, and really just getting your toes wet in that.
Got it. Thank you. Any other thoughts from the panel on gaining experience while still in college or start pursuing your education?
I would just caveat that I agree 100% with what Mendel said, but I just think what you should take away from that, though, is that their employers aren't looking for an expectation. They don't have the expectation that you're going to come in fresh out of school and you're going to be able to work independently on your own, and you're going to be a superstar right away. What they want to see is people who are familiar with the products that they use or the types of products that they use. So there's an idea, like if you know how to use one stat software, you could easily that can transfer into learning another stat software. But they want to see people who have taken on challenges, have some idea of a process, and something that they could work with. That's the biggest key. And I agree with the idea of reaching out to professors to do research, and one of the advantages of that is we also have a guide. But now I think one of the advantages is that there's just so many opportunities available online, whether it's boot camps or just different types of little projects that you could take on where you could play around in R or Python, which are free. Back in my day when I was in school, like you either needed to have a license through a school or you weren't getting it on your own because it was really expensive to have like an SPSS or a state license. But now it's all free and it's available to you. Employers are just looking for people who have some experience, but really that they could train, and something that differentiates them. But don't go in, I wouldn't go into it thinking that like you need to know everything, because you're going to show up, if you do, you're going to show up on the first day with imposter syndrome when you realize that you don't really know how to do anything, and it's okay. They didn't hire you thinking that you know how to do everything. They hired to train you.
Got it. Thank you. Any other comments before we move on to the next question?
I think that Mendel and Evan pretty much hit it on the nail. I would say if you do want to get more experience, I would just want to highlight what Mendel said, which is Kaggle data sets are the biggest lie in the entire universe when you get into the real world. Try to get some experience with your own data. If you're into sports, like you can create like a fantasy football app that will connect to Yahoo Fantasy. I've done that before. If you're into music, you can connect to Spotify's API through Python and do some data analysis on your listening. So there's a lot of different ways to get your own data and do your own projects, and log on to GitHub and see what kind of piques your interest.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. So Jonathan, I again, question for you, but open to the group. What's this job search strategy that you use that you found to be the best that works for you for your first job, for internships, any experiences that you continue to use today?
Yeah, I imagine that the students here, you've kind of heard this again and again. And I know when I was hearing it, I was like frustrated and overwhelmed by it. But it's all about the networking and making connections and figuring out how to make a human connection. When I was looking for my first job, I probably applied to, I don't know, 60, 70 places, and the majority of them I didn't hear back from. The only ones that maybe a handful I did, but the only ones that had any traction were the ones that I had some human connection to. I either just like found out who the recruiter was on LinkedIn and messaged them. Recruiters are generally much more responsive. They make money when they are able to fill their roles. So there's like a financial incentive for them to reply to you and to try to help you, even though they're also helping themselves. But also kind of just like expanding the community, tapping into the community that we're a part of. I think we have a unique space here that we're all kind of like part of the, YU, whatever it is, connected to YU.
Alumni network.
Yeah, YU network. I was starting to say family, but I know it's a little bit loaded. So anyway, yeah, I think that just trying to make whatever human connection you can, browsing LinkedIn, reaching out to recruiters, that's definitely the most effective thing that I found.
Thanks very much.
If I could just jump on here, don't discount any amount of networking. Something as simple as sending out a message to a bunch of people that saying Happy Pesach, Happy Passover. Even if it's someone you haven't spoken to 3 months, 6 months, they will be touched that you remembered they exist. Especially nowadays with COVID, people are working from home. You never see people unless it's like your next door neighbor. Just the fact that you remember that there are all these other people around the world and you remember them, that's very touching to people. And it doesn't need to be a loaded thing. It's just, hey, I was thinking about you, or hey, I saw this article, thought you might be interested, or just Happy Pesach.
It's very thoughtful. Thank you. Thank you. Any other points on job search strategies?
Yeah, I'd add one other thing. Analytics is a very broad term. And the reality is that you guys are picking up skills now in school, but how you apply them is very, very broad. You're not going to have a full understanding of how those skills could be applied. And the best way to learn how is to speak to people in the industry to find out what they do. And some of those things will speak to you, and some of those things you're going to run away from. So it's important to also, because there are a lot of bad analytics jobs also. So it's important to speak to people just to get a sense of like what's interesting to you, and where are the areas that you'll avoid. We're in the great resign, the great resignation, whatever they're calling it, and a lot of employers are desperate. And so getting a job might be easier now than it had been in the past, but you want to put yourself in a position where you know this is the type of situation you want to put yourself in. And the best way to do that is to speak to people, just to genuinely, usually when you reach out to people and you say, oh, I'm interested in learning about like what you do, it's networking because you want to get your resume over, and which is fine, and you should do that. But I would definitely encourage you to also really hear them out, to ask the specifics. What do you do? How do you do it? Where's the value? And figure out like what speaks to you, because analytics have the range of the technical aspect of analytics varies a lot. Some people want to do things that are very, very technical, and some people want to do things that are moderately technical, but want to focus on other areas like strategy or something like that. So I encourage you to reach out to people.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If I could add to that,
Yeah.
so I think that's a really good point, and even broader than that is the huge number of roles that are like all related, I guess, to data analytics. Some people are going to be doing analytics, some people are going to be doing machine learning. Then you have all the project managers, the technical managers, the people who are helping you liaison between different teams, the software developers. All those positions take a different skill set and are hugely valuable to any organization, and are necessary and fit a slightly different mold depending on what you are interested in. And those are also all roles that you could be pursuing.
And there's an assumption that you know about the industry you're working in. And that's not the case usually. So analytics people are kind of just, you have your skill and you plant yourself in an industry to do, you're the analytics person usually within that industry. But most analytics people, like, they don't know anything about the industry that they work in. And while they're there, they have to learn about it. So that's also a big caveat. Like, to be aware of the industry that you're learning about, so you can be most effective.
I'll just say one other thing. I know we started. It's not my jam, but I would say like the internet, social media world is actually at least in the product analytics space that I work in. It's not so big, and it's pretty active, and people are generally really nice and open and helpful. So if like there's lots of blogs or kind of like email newsletters that you subscribe to, if you just like reply to the author of the newsletter, they might be willing to make a connection. Or if somebody is posting something on LinkedIn and you have some thoughtful response or question, like, people are generally pretty open to engage in conversation. There's different like Slack groups, Slack communities that have popped up that are generally pretty open, and you can join and just kind of like see what's going on and meet people there too. So that's another outlet.
All right, thank you. So Zev, I wanted to ask you, and again, open to the group, something about networking, but networking seems to weave its way into the job search strategy. So I kind of want to take it a step further regarding outreach when networking on LinkedIn, because a lot of students do have questions. What do I say? What do I do? So what's something that stands out in a way when someone reaches out to you, and what's something that you definitely don't want to read in a message?
What I don't want to read in a message is, I need your referral for a job. And I've gotten that, like, straight up, just, I need your referral for a job. Definitely don't want to read that in a message. I think Evan said it earlier, and I completely agree. Most of the time, like, it's just a formality. Like, we understand. We were there one time where we ultimately, like, there's an end goal. We want the resume to go to the recruiter, so we're meeting up with you. But there's a few things that go into actually reaching out. The person on the other end is aware of that transaction, but they really do want to also see that you are somebody who kind of knows how to, like, write a cold email. It's kind of maybe a validation of, where you are and what you're doing right now. So having those good skills of saying, I'm a student at X college, I've been studying this, I have a few questions about my next steps, my career, and I see that you've had a successful career in analytics, and that you went to this college for this degree and you went to this master's for this degree. Can you give me a little bit of help with regards to how I should approach the next steps in my journey? Just going along with that, I think, is a very helpful kind of template that I've used before of trying to make these connections, and then actually going about and, you know, having a cup of coffee with that person or just having a phone call.
Awesome, thank you. So for the panelists, anything to chime in about, any horror stories, bad messages you got that just really turned you off to helping anyone at all, or if you got some good messages that ended up being great network connections thereafter?
I have, I don't, does anyone else want to go first? All right, so a few things. So yeah, I agree with Zev entirely. I've been doing this for a while now, though. I'm working with YU students and students from my grad school, and a lot of people reach out to me. So I'll tell you, like, there are a few things that are, I would say, are no-nos. And so one, like, write a good email. It shouldn't be long, but like, show us that you could write, because if we refer you, you're representing us. So we want to make sure that you're polished, but also understand that whatever you're doing in school, and it might sound impressive on paper, it's not usually as impressive as you think to a professional, and that's okay. You just don't want to come off as someone who thinks that they know everything. It's good to come off as humble. Like, we know, like, if you're in a program that you're learning, that you're smart and you're picking up a lot of skills, but you don't need to make it sound like, you know, like you're the next Einstein. It'll come out on its own. So you don't need to, like, give all the technical details of everything that you're doing, because, like, it's too much. Another thing that happens, and I think it might be happening more because of COVID, is that if you reach out to someone and let's say they take a while to get back to you, or they don't, either way, once they get back to you, within the next day, you need to respond to them. If you reach out for help from someone, and then they responded to you, and then you come back to them like 2 to 4 to whatever weeks later with a response, like, it just doesn't come off well. And they're going to be less likely to want to help you, and it's just not good for your career in general. And I would say, even if you emailed someone and, like, they get back to you 2 months later, that doesn't mean you should, like, now, like, this is the dynamic we're going to have. We're like, oh, I'll take, like, my time to get back to you, because just assume, like, people are busy, and give people the benefit of the doubt, but, like, you're the one who wants the job, so make sure to respond promptly.
All right, thank you, appreciate that. Any other points here that the panel wants to share?
I would also just say, within networking itself, I once gave did one of these panels at Columbia, and I told the panel, you should, in order to network, you're paying a lot of money to go to school. The network is where all the value is. You don't, like, the resume is important, but, like, you can't rely on the algorithms to pick up, like, your resume. The network is where it's at. So you should be reaching out to your network. If you want a job, like in my field, like, you should be reaching out to me, and don't like contact me on LinkedIn and say, hi, how are you? I really appreciated the panel. Have a nice day. You need to be more forward. You need to take that extra step. Don't wait for me or someone else on the panel to say, oh, thank you very much. And whenever you'd like to, like, you know, talk, you know, feel free to reach out to me. You should be saying that. You should be saying, I'd like to speak to you. Don't assume, like, and it won't come over harshly or too aggressive if you just put it out there. But you need to make the first step. You shouldn't be timid and wait for someone else to make it for you.
I just want to address Randy's question. The other panelists could maybe have a different perspective on it, but I do want to touch on something that Evan said, which is when we're referring somebody, it's reflective of us. So Randy, like, my perspective, I want, like, a snap response, because that shows me that you are interested and that you're prioritizing this. And to me, that's what I want. I don't want somebody who's maybe has different priorities or something like that. This should be their top focus if they're going for maybe a job somewhere. And if I'm going to ultimately refer somebody, I would definitely want to know that they're the type of person who's going to stay on top of this and drive it to a successful result.
Yeah, don't overthink it.
No, as I've been said before to me by mentors, no paralysis through analysis. So if that's any help,
Can I also add one more thing in terms
go
of
for
like
it.
the process and the networking? Something what you should also be aware of is you should be taking advantage of the Career Guidance Center at YU, even after you're gone, because you will likely be in a situation where even after you leave YU, after your first job, you might be looking to go somewhere else. And it could be a lonely path. And I'll tell you, like back when I was in YU, they didn't have all the answers. They don't know the YU guidance, career guidance. They don't know, they're not experts in every field, so they can't give you the nitty gritty. But even just like to have someone to speak to for advice, work on your resume, so you don't feel alone. It's so important and could be so helpful to give you the confidence to keep going forward. And you take that with you in the interview process. So I would definitely encourage you while you're in YU and even after after you leave, the YU guidance team is a really important support for this whole process.
I can confirm we are not paying Evan a nickel to say any of this. So we really appreciate that note, and it is very important to consult our offices for when you need support. I do want to make a note to pause and say, I love that questions are coming in. I did get several. I want you all to hold on to these questions. We're going to have a Q&A open with the audience and the panelists after. I want to get through several more questions, and then we'll get right to that portion of the evening. Promise that we'll get to everybody's questions before the event is wrapped. But again, just in case you didn't hear it the first time, we are not paying Evan to say that you should come to our office for some advising support. So one point I actually do want to ask of the group, and specifically Evan, what's one overlooked skill that you had to learn or that you see that entry-level professionals might be overlooking themselves that's either highly marketable or highly integral to analytics-based roles?
Communication, I think, is the biggest thing. One of the unfortunate things you see in the analytics world are you see the people who are good analysts, but they're not, it's going to be very hard for them to progress, to become good managers, good directors. And so having the ability to communicate well, verbally, in written form, in PowerPoint, goes a really, really long way. And it's a skill that you develop. Just because it's something you may not be stellar at right now, that doesn't mean that you can't be great at it. But that's like the difference maker was going to let you move forward in your career. Because at some point, the way it works in analytics, a lot of the actual work, at least like from what I've seen, it gets done by more junior staff and they're guided by more senior staff. But the senior staff, their other responsibilities are managing others, coordinating with other offices, working with clients, and that takes a lot of soft skills. So I would just focus on that, focus on your presentation skills, put a lot of emphasis on it because it really does stand out.
Terrific. What about the rest of the panel? Any overlooked skill of your own that you've recently developed, overlooked skills that you see in entry-level professionals they may not be considering?
I think everything Evan said is spot on. I do want to add a skill that I didn't have and that it took me a while. And then when I was doing my job search, I saw this everywhere. SQL is in a lot of companies. A lot of companies want that as almost a foundational skill that you should know and kind of be familiar with when you're coming into analytics and data science. It's really simple. It's a really simple language, but it can get pretty big and pretty broad pretty quickly. So that was definitely a skill that I had to brush up on when I was going through my job search, because I just saw it. I saw it in a lot of places as not a desired skill, but a required skill.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Also, one other thing, because you mentioned like Zev, you mentioned that like you saw it on the job descriptions with SQL. But one thing, the caveat is like you'll see job descriptions that like list like 5 to 10 different programs that they're looking for. You don't actually need to know all those programs. You don't even need to know half those programs. If you know one of them really, really well, like if all you know is Python really well or R really well, apply with confidence, like you'll be fine. That just means that the HR person who wrote the job description knows that like these other skills have come up at some point, but that doesn't mean that there's expectation that you need to come in knowing all of them, or or that you're even going to be touching all of them in that role.
Good to know. Thank you. So I wanted to get to questions that are a little bit more specific to each of the panelists, and I wanted to start with Mendel. Mendel, I took a look at your LinkedIn. As all of you who have been getting my flyers, you should have done a little bit of research into the panelists. You have a bit of a background, and not only in data analytics, but also data science. For those who are in the audience that may not be able to say with confidence what the distinction is, what would you say that they should know about distinguishing it and how to choose perhaps a path to go with their career?
Sure. So data analytics is the base upon which all sorts of analytics and understanding data is built on. That includes all forms of statistics that you would want to look at. And that's also going to be the core way that you understand any form of data before doing any sort of data science, machine learning stuff. When people refer to data science, they're generally referring to machine learning specifically, which is essentially a subfield really of data analytics, but specialized in the mathematics, the models, the computations, and often systems that you're going to be using for that. It kind of depends on your interest, because it is a specialty field. The rule is always you're going to do data analytics before you do any data science. Often for probably the vast majority of business problems, you're going to be doing like 95%. You can often get 95% of the gain with 5% of the work using traditional analytics and a couple of conditional statements written by someone who has expertise in the industry. And the machine learning is often used for very complex feature sets and for very small gains that can still have an outsized impact. Like, for example, an extreme example would be Facebook getting 1% of their users to spend 1% more time on scrolling Facebook. That's a huge gain for them. For most companies, that's not. So for a lot of traditional businesses, they're looking for analytics, and especially if they're earlier stage, they're going to want to first just understand what do we have, what are we looking at, what can we understand here easily. Machine learning pipelines technically can also be very difficult, complex, and expensive to implement and maintain. So I guess the specific answer is that it's a subfield, a specialty field, and depending on what your interests are, may or may not be what you're aiming for.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. If I may, Jonathan, I noticed that you have a R-Square Edge certification. Could you tell us how important is it that the people in this room consider certifications and what role they might play in career advancement?
Sure. Yeah, just to give more context to my story. So I went to IU. I graduated in 2013. I started studying computer science and math, and then I switched over and I studied psychology. I moved over to the social sciences. I studied psychology and economics, and then I stayed on at YU and I did smicha. Over that time, I decided I didn't want to work as a rabbi, and then I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. So I kind of needed to start from sort of scratch. I had the background in social sciences and stats, so I needed kind of like a way to get me to the next step. So I did like a kind of boot camp. It wasn't like a traditional boot camp, but that kind of thing. So yeah, that's like what that comes from. I would say that back then, it's not even that long ago. I guess it's almost 10 years ago. Like there weren't that many degrees, even in like business intelligence or data stuff. So most people were like self-teaching or kind of like figuring it out on their own or applying some other degree. So these programs like boot camps or other certifications were a way to kind of bridge that gap. I think now if you're kind of coming out of college and studied something related to the field, I would say especially early on, it's pretty superfluous to really pursue some of these like certifications or kind of like really expensive boot camps or things like that. They'll if you speak to them, they'll try to sell you pretty hard the other way. But my experience is that if you're learning the stuff in school, then especially right away, it's not necessary.
Got it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Zev, you're one of our panelists who has a master's degree relative to your field. Is it something that's absolutely necessary, would you say, for some, depending on what they're doing? Or is it more of a decision that you'd like to make to continue education?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. Kind of similar to what Jonathan was just saying. I went into the master's because I was kind of knew I was going to do a master's, and I was at a point in my career where I really wanted to get another a broader perspective on analytics as a whole. So I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. It really depends on where you want to go and what your current skills are and how you feel with those skills. If you want to be a data scientist working at Google in their machine learning division, and you don't feel confident in Python, it might be something to consider. It's really about what your career is and trying to align with what the skills that you'll ultimately need in the position that you desire to be.
All right, thanks very much. So Evan, I wanted to ask you about your career advancement and your perspective on it. You've been with Group M for a number of years and moved up through several different kinds of roles. From your perspective, was it more important and more valuable for you to stick with the employer who you work for and advance that way? And is that something that you would advise from your experience?
Okay, this is loaded. All right, so here's the deal. Yeah, so I've been with Group M for about 6.5 years. Before then, I was also jumping around to like trying to figure out what to do with my analytics background, and came to Group M and I was very happy. So I came I think I was 31 as a senior analyst, and now I'm a director. And so people jump, especially in advertising, they jump all the time, 12 to 24 months. And jump is very, very common. And the reason that they do it is because some industries, or many industries, they just don't promote well. And if you do get a promotion, they don't compensate you well. So you could have come in with the salary that you like, but then you get your promotion. And by the way, in some companies, like we'll only give you a raise if you get a promotion, which is ridiculous. So you get your promotion and they give you, I don't know, let's say a 5 or 10% increase. But if you would have gone and especially these days with inflation, that's not covering at all. So if you jump to another place, you can get a 30% increase. And so you see that, you'll see the people who will make those jumps. And I would say you have to be careful for a few reasons. So one, every time you go to a new job, you have no idea if it's a good situation for you or a bad situation. So there's a lot of risk with that. Just because you're going to be making more money or going to get the promotion doesn't mean you're going to be happy, because you need there's so much value in being in a situation where you're set up for success, you like the people you work with, you enjoy your work, and that job works with your lifestyle. So like you're not working till midnight and like on weekends, on a weekly basis. But so I actually did jump. It's not on LinkedIn. I was advised 2 years in to make a switch to a competitor to become a manager. And on my last day, they told me, listen, if you stay, we'll give you that raise and the promotion. But they didn't give it to me in writing, so I had to go to the competitor for 3 weeks and discovered they are really good at selling things, but they don't know what they're doing. I would have been miserable. It was what we call an analytics sweatshop, which is, imagine just in a back room, there are a bunch of smart, shy people who are just working without having enough guidance or enough timeline on statistical models, and it wasn't a good situation. On a deeper level, what I'll say, once you're in your career, just keep this in mind. Everyone needs mentors. You're going to have mentors that are going to be very good for advancing your knowledge, your skills, your knowledge of the industry, but they may not be the right people to advance your career. And so what that means is, like, once it's time for your promotion, they might be great at teaching you things, but if they're the ones there's always someone who's advocating for you, and advocating for your promotion or your raise just may not be their thing. And so it's important to be aware of what strengths your mentors have, and your advancement and your financial career growth, that's important also. So it's important to have multiple mentors to make sure that you're taken care of, because otherwise you could be in a situation where you're sitting around for a few years. And so definitely be aware of that. And it takes time to figure out, but look out for it.
Evan, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing, and I appreciate all of our panelists for sharing all the perspectives that they have thus far this evening. I am going to stop the recording to open it up to the group to ask questions. I do have some that are in the chat that I would like to go to first, and then to the rest of the group.